we go. Okay. So now we got the real stuff. And we'll get about a dozen slides into it. We'll just talk a little bit through some of this stuff. So Google advertising. We'll talk about Google's ad operations, revenue models. Eventually, not today, we'll talk about fraud detection and application program interfaces. That's, we've said many times programs interface to exchange data. We'll talk a little bit more detail about that. And then some of Google's supporting database systems, because of course, advertising is a big thing for them. Now, you all might think of Google as a search engine, right? When you're just thinking, what is Google? Then you're like, oh yeah, Google's something I do to find answers. Fair enough. A lot of people would answer that. Some people might think of Google mostly as a bunch of cloud applications, right? So they recognize that sure, Google has its search engine thing, but if you're working with Google Cloud a lot, you could come to think of Google as, yeah, they're basically a cloud operation, fine. And if you're really interested in tech stuff, you might think that Google is doing some important cutting edge tech like Tesla does, stuff with self-driving cars. And you might think that's pretty cool. Now, of course, all those capture some portion of the truth. None of them are wrong, but of course, none of them are complete either. In fact, more than anything else, Google is the world's biggest advertising operation. The neat thing about this, Google doesn't even make the ads. Instead, they're basically in control of online billboards. So they have online billboards all over the internet. They control the ads that go on the billboards, and they control where those billboards are placed. And they bring in a couple $100 billion a year from it, right? The last date I had revenue the class started was 2021, so 209 billion for then. I'm sure it's a little higher now. Now, there's a little link to an article that Google had a revenue drop during the, that quarter where COVID happened, second quarter of 2020. A lot of people weren't going out very much because, quarantine. And so, yeah, because they weren't going out very much and they were maybe worried about their financial situation, yeah, they weren't, doing a whole lot of Googling and clicking on ads and buying stuff. So they did have a little hiccup there, but they're since way past where they were. Google's doing fine, as far as I know. All right. Now, well, let's do this. I'll do it in Paint. Can you see? Oh, good. All right, we get rid of that. Whoop. Okay, now if we're going to talk about Google's operation, basically it's this. First, build the world's biggest and best search engine. Okay. Step 2, who knows? Step 3, lots of cash. All right, you know what? I'm gonna channel my inner Breaking Bad and say fat stacks of cash. Okay. So what's step 2? That's the real trick, isn't it? Because everybody knew, well, the search engine thing's kind of useful, but how do you make money off of that? Well, number 1, run ads with search results, right? And this is better than just putting ads on Google's homepage. Because if you go to Google's homepage, at that point, Google doesn't know anything about you. All they know is you're looking for something, right? So yeah, Google could run some banner ads on that page, but banner ads are like, ads on a page, they run across the entire width of the screen like a banner, and they're not customized for anybody. It's like anybody going to that page sees the same ad. And that's not going to be really useful because most people aren't going to be interested in any given ad you see. Even with ads that do a good job of targeting, Google's probably not getting much more than a 3%, click rate on them. But for just, banner ads that are just shown to everybody the same way, it's going to be way, way less than that. So specifically, run ads with search results. Number 2, identify good ads by good ads for search terms. So for example, if somebody's doing a search for shoes, probably want to show an ad for shoes instead of, say, for cars. If somebody's looking for tennis gear, right, you could show ads for tennis balls, tennis rackets, tennis shoes, whatever, okay? So run ads with search results, identify good ads for search terms, and number 3, control the on-page placement of ads. So if you have a really good ad that you think is going to make a lot of money because a lot of people are going to click on it, you want to put that at the top of the screen, right? So people see it right away. If you have an ad that's like marginal, whatever, you don't know, yeah, you can push that a little bit further down. Maybe show that at the bottom of the page, and people only see it if they actually bother scrolling down, which most people don't. Okay? So factors like that are what Google uses. They show ads, hopefully some people click on them. When they click on them, Google makes money. So Google has to do a good job of picking which ads to show when and where to place them on the pages. All right, so that's our single image summary of this whole lecture. The rest is details. Does this make sense? Okay. So all that top stuff that I said, that's what I said. The core questions again, figuring out which ads go well with which search terms, because it's not always as obvious as seeing shoes and ads of shoes. Number 2, prioritizing ad placement. That's that on-page stuff. And number 3, figuring out the right price for clicks. Well, as it happens, Google has decided to let advertisers bid as to how much they're willing to pay for a click that brings a visitor to their site. So, a little more about this. Let's do it. Do it in Notepad. Let's do it in Notepad. Okay. So I'll just start off with the idea. So Google wants to optimize the long-term revenue from showing ads. Okay? That means not just maximizing the click count and not just maximizing the bid amount, right? Because if you have an ad where the ad doesn't get clicked at all, it doesn't matter how much the advertiser bid. And if you have an ad where the advertiser is bidding like the minimum rate of like a quarter per click, you're going to have to get a lot of clicks before that adds up to anything worth adding up to. So what Google wants to do is maximize the product of clicks times bid per click. Okay? That bid per click is how much money the ad is going to bring in. So we could say the click rate, if you like. So, concrete example. Suppose ad 1 has we'll call it a CTR, click-through rate of 10% and bids $1 per click. Okay? What's the average amount of money Google expects to get each time it shows the ad? So, every time Google shows the ad, there's a 10% chance someone clicks on it, and if someone clicks on it, Google gets $1. So how much would Google expect to get on average per time it shows the ad? 10 cents, 10% of $1, right? Not how much the time it shows, not how much every time somebody clicks, but basically if it shows the ad 10 times, Google expects to get one click, $1. So 10 cents. All right, so 10 cents per showing. Now, suppose ad 2 has a CTR, click-through rate, of 5% and bids $2 per click. How much does Google expect to get per showing? The same, 10 cents, right? 5% of $2. Don't worry, you won't have to do this math on the exam. I'm just demonstrating some stuff. So, in terms of this, given that this is all we know about these two ads, and we can assume they're they're approximately the same for some set of search terms, which one should Google put at the top of the page and which one should go below? If they're both paying the same amount expected per showing. Correct answer, it doesn't matter. Yeah, it doesn't matter. Google doesn't care. Google's probably making a dime either way. Now, if you wanted to, you could get into the whole risk averse versus, risk seeking, whatever. But if the average amount is this, Google kind of doesn't care, right? Either one. Okay, because they both have the same long-term revenue, right? 10 cents per every time you show. I'm going to show you something else. Suppose Ad1 wants that higher position and bumps up its bid to $2. Okay? What's the expected per showing? Bidding $2, the percent of click remains 10%. Yeah, 20 cents. It just doubles, right? Google's getting twice as much money per click. We all agree? So, to keep up, Ad2 must actually also double its bid, right? We're going to say it doesn't have control over the click-through rate. If Ad1 doubles its bid, then to keep it the same, Ad2 has to double its bid to $4. Okay, so it has, because the ad has a lower click-through rate, this ad has to be willing to pay a lot more per click to keep up with this other one. All right, we'll talk about this. And we'll come back. So, the key factor in Google's bidding model is what's called the quality score. So the quality score is about this, how much Google thinks it's going to get whenever it shows the ad. That's basically how good of an ad it is, how likely the ad is to be clicked on. So the big thing, if Google doesn't have any knowledge about the ad, if Google hasn't been running it, it's just an ad that got delivered this morning, and Google says, oh, well, how should we evaluate this? Well, then Google's going to use relevance to search terms as a baseline. So the advertiser will include some tags with the ad, and Google will figure, okay, these tags match with these search terms well enough. We'll give this one a try. The big one, how often users click on the ad. So if we want to say that, yeah, quality score is pretty close to how often users click on the ad, yeah, that's true. That's a big part of it. The other thing, Google has a very popular and mostly free web analytics platform called Google Analytics. A lot of websites are using it, and that gives Google a lot of information about what users are clicking on what ads and going to websites and whether they're buying stuff. So Google has a lot of this information. And to the extent they have it, Google might also consider how often the ad leads to a purchase. Because the thing is, if the advertiser is getting a lot of clicks, but none of those clicks are actually leading to sales, at some point the advertiser is going to hang it up. He's like, what are we spending money here for? But if the ads lead to clicks and some reasonable fraction of those clicks lead to actual sales, the advertiser will be happy with Google and they will stay on, and they may even be willing to bump their bid price up when another advertiser tries to knock them out of that top spot. So those are factors that go into the quality score. But again, general idea is how good of an ad this is in terms of getting clicks. Now, of course, Google wants to show ads that are likely to lead to long-term revenue. So all else equal, Google's going to pick the ad with the higher quality score. But of course, Google's not doing advertisements for their own sake. It's not doing them as some sort of cultural enhancement or, the art of advertising. Google's just trying to make money. So if you're running an ad and it's maybe not as good in terms of click rate, well, you can certainly offer Google some more money to compensate them for what they're losing by putting a different ad up on the top, right? And that returns us back to this. So again, you can always bid higher in order to keep that top spot. But if your ad doesn't have a great quality score, right, if it doesn't have a great click rate, then you're going to have to bid more. And it might still be that, this $2 per click is fair and this $4 per click is fair for whatever reason. But, they're going to have to pay more is one thing. And in terms of risk, if nothing else, in terms of risk, ad 2 is taking on more risk, right? Because if ad 2 gets several clicks and none of them buy anything, ad 2 is out a lot more money than if ad 1 gets some clicks and doesn't. Also, this smaller click-through rate is prone to sample size issues, things like that. So again, anybody can bid whatever they want, but it's going to be harder for ads with a weaker quality score to claim that top position because they're going to have to bid a lot more. They're going to have to pay Google a lot more per click to keep up. Okay, moving on. Unless anyone has questions. Does that make sense? Are we good to go forward, or would anyone like to know more? Okay. Now, Google has ads for two categories of sites. Number one, basically sites that are trusted. So its own site, Google.com, of course, subsidiaries of Alphabet, like YouTube. Alphabet, in case people don't know, is like the holding company for Google. So YouTube is obviously part of that umbrella. Any close partners of Google that Google thinks basically isn't going to rip them off. So Google essentially trusts them. The other one, third-party sites who have agreed to run ads selected by Google. So think of that, random bloggers, right? People with whom Google has no substantial connection. Google doesn't entirely trust them. Like if it's some unemployed blogger who might try clicking on the ads themselves in order to make pizza money, things like that. Okay, so this split gets reflected in Google's two advertising models. So there's one model for ads that are shown on Google or websites of close partners, and there's another one for ads that are shown on other sites. Now, before we get into that, I'm going to reiterate, Google search results are pure, so they cannot be bought. All the stuff we're going to talk about is strictly about advertising. You can pay Google more to get your ad in a better position on the page. You cannot pay Google more in order to get your ordinary website listing in the search engine results posted higher. Okay? So all this stuff about paying for position, that's just about ads, not about ordinary search results. Excuse me. Okay. So the two models, Google Ads and AdSense. So with Google Ads, what happens? Advertisers join Google Ads, they send Google their ads, and then those ads can be shown on any number of Google platforms. So number one, with actual search results. Number two, with other Google properties like Marketplace, whatever. They can be shown on websites of close Google affiliates like YouTube, and they can be shown on websites not affiliated with Google. Okay, so that's the one. If you send your advertisement to Google, Google has any of those options of where it's going to show your ads. The other one is AdSense. So AdSense is for content creators who want to try to somehow monetize their content. So they're writing entertaining articles or whatever, and they try to get ads, Google run ads to do that. Now, I guess, in a different time or in a more relaxed culture, we could have this whole conversation about, say, OnlyFans, which I know the kids all know about these days, but that's an entirely different type of revenue model, right? But the point is, people who are creating content, whatever that content may be, they're trying to make money on it. So, yeah. Anyway, so with AdSense, content publishers like bloggers join AdSense and agree to let Google run ads on their pages, right? You have a blog and you tell Google, okay, in this corner of the page, you can run ads whenever somebody looks at it. And again, yeah, typical case is a blogger. Now, Google primarily uses pay per click, PPC. That is, Google shows the ad. If somebody clicks on it, the advertiser pays Google. If nobody clicks on it, then Google does not get paid. So that's it. And we'll talk more about that before it's all over, but not today. So here's a picture of the four ad models. All right, so we have Google Ads here. The first one on the left, ads shown with Google search. So because it's Google's own search results, it doesn't make sense for Google to steal money out of its right pocket to stuff its left pocket, right? That wouldn't make any sense. Google trusts itself not to run scams. The other thing, it automatically uses search terms. You don't get to the search results unless you entered in some search terms. So this tends to be more accurate. Google can do a pretty good job of figuring out what users are looking for. And back until about 5 years ago, this used to be called AdWords. This was its whole, this was Google's big program. AdWords no longer exists as a separate thing for marketing purposes. It got bundled into Google Ads because, over the last several years, things shifted from people mostly using Google as a website to find search results to having a lot of other things they were doing to find things like apps and such. And Google has to have mechanisms to work with those. So again, Google kind of de-emphasized AdWords, even though the feature is still there. The other one is ads shown without search. So other Google properties, whatever, if there's not a search involved, Google doesn't have any search tools there, right? It can't really figure out exactly what people are looking for. The site is still trusted because it's still part of Google. That's why that line is under Google. But Google has to figure out some kind of content analysis or try to get some metrics around people who visit this part of Google are similar to people who have run these searches, and that's our best guess for what the ads should be. Right now, sometimes you can do a decent job of it, like if it's some discussion or other thing about, say, cars. Sure, Google could show you things about cars, but a lot of times it's murky. The other one's close affiliates. So again, close affiliates like YouTube or other major trusted business partners with Google, they're trusted, but they often need content analysis, right? Imagine Google wants to run ads on YouTube. All Google maybe knows is the video you're looking at. Well, how do they know? If you haven't even done a search, that's a really hard thing to do. And we often observe this on YouTube. When I had, when my kids were little, it'd be like 2, 3 years old, and we'd be watching something like Peppa Pig or something on YouTube. And, there'd be an ad for some obviously not child-friendly R-rated movie. And I'd be like, oh, why is this? Whatever, right? So again, they try to do content analysis. It's not perfect, but it doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be, good enough to make some money. And again, last one, other websites. This is the AdSense model. Other websites least trusted, right? If it's some random blogger who just showed up to Google, right? Google doesn't really know who he is, and he wants to run ads in the corner of his blog, and Google says, fine, but we're going to watch you because we're going to make sure you don't just click that ad yourself like 60 times. Okay, so least trusted, there's definitely some mechanisms there to watch that. And again, generally needs content analysis. The vast majority of visits to a blog do not happen through a search engine, right? You might find the blog through a search engine, but you might just as well find it through a referral link or somebody just telling you about it. And then once you've gone to it and you said, hey, this is interesting, I'm going to keep coming back and read it, you probably either remember the site name or made a bookmark for it, and then you go back and visit. Most of the time, you're not going through a search engine, so Google doesn't really know that much about you. Okay. All right. Now, AdWords is what we'll talk about for the rest of today. So with AdWords, advertisers pay to get their ads placed with associated search terms. And it's affected by, number one, the search term relevance to the ad. Again, if it's a search for shoes, Google's going to pop up that stuff about shoes, ads about shoes. And the other thing, advertiser bids. So there may be any number of ads on a page. If they're all equal in terms of search term relevance, like Google has 2,000 ads for shoes, Google's still got to try to figure out which one it should show at the top because it really does want to maximize its revenue. Now, over the last 20 years, AdWords came out a little more than 20 years ago. And in that time, the internet population and usage has grown tremendously. There's a lot more users, there's a lot more websites, there's a lot more advertisers willing to advertise online, but basically the same number of search terms. So what that means, that puts a lot of pressure on the prices. So in the early days, you could be an advertiser and be pretty carefree and careless about what terms you bid on and still have a decent shot of getting making money off of it. But as more advertisers join, there's only one spot at the top, and you got to bid more and more because other people are forcing you to bid more, right? So obvious case, imagine if you're the first shoe seller to join AdWords and you just, bid a quarter on shoes. That's easy, right? You're the only one there. You don't have to pay very much per click. But pretty soon somebody else is going to come along and say a quarter, we'll bid $2. And somebody else, $2, we'll bid $3. And it goes up. And now it's a lot harder to be up at the top. So consequences of what advertisers have had to do. Number one, in various ways, redesigning their site to improve relevance. So one thing that could be is search engine optimization, like we've talked about, where basically people design their sites in order to rank higher in ordinary search results. Great thing about that is any traffic you get through that is going to be free. You don't pay for it. Nobody clicked on an ad. So, that's a very nice one there. The other ways, in various ways, you can do some mechanisms to improve, how well your ad is doing. So trying to only show it along with search terms where people are likely to click on the ad and come and buy something, that will tend to make things go better as well. And if you can somehow bring that back around to improving sales from ad clicks, this is one of the things, how often the ads lead to a purchase, that's going to positively impact your quality score as well. The other thing, of course, just paying more attention to ad effectiveness. Early days of AdWords, you could kind of bid on anything. You didn't have to bid very much. You'd probably be near the top. If you weren't getting anything good out of it, fine, cancel it. But these days, if you're joining that program, you got to maintain pretty close attention on how well your ads are doing. You look at how much you're spending on them. You look at how much you're getting for them. And there are a lot more sophisticated models built in these days. If anybody ever does an MBA here or an MSMIS, you can take my web analytics class if I'm still doing it. And I'll talk a lot more about that. But that's what happens. So, okay. Now, AdWords history. So first of all, AdWords was originated in 2000, actually originated outside of Google. And not saying Google stole the idea, but I will say it's a matter of public record that they settled a number of lawsuits out of course about intellectual property theft. And yeah, in the tech field, intellectual property theft is actually pretty common. I don't know how many of you know this, but the original version of Windows, for example, the interface for it, what made it Windows as opposed to DOS, was actually not written by Microsoft. Bill Gates contracted with some guy, says, hey, can you design, a user interface screen for this? And those guys are like, yeah, okay, we can do that. And, they paid him like a few $100. That went into the first version of Windows. So with this in particular, what happened? Silicon Valley is kind of a small place. It was smaller back then. And a lot of those guys, they knew each other. They had worked together, maybe gone to school together, at some point. And so they'd get together on the weekends and they'd have, shop talk. They'd be like, hey, what are you guys doing? And they wouldn't like give away, a briefcase full of classified documents, but they say, oh yeah, we're working on this advertising model, trying to get, money from doing this. And the other guys would say, oh yeah, that's kind of cool. We're doing something a little bit like that, but a little different, And so word gets around. It's really hard to keep a secret under those circumstances. The other thing, 2000, the dot-com bubble was deflating, right? And so businesses are going under. People that are in not very sustainable businesses, they're looking to jump ship and go somewhere else. So there's a lot of rapid personnel turnover around this time too. And sure, a lot of people leaving their businesses, they are forced to sign non-disclosure agreements, but those are really hard to enforce, right? If you happen to know that a guy is good with advertising algorithms and databases and stuff like that, and then you hire him to work on a project involving advertising databases and ad selection algorithms, it's not going to be a huge surprise when he comes up with a solution that's pretty similar to what he was working on at the other place. And the other thing is, a fair number of those companies went under anyway, and then it becomes even harder to enforce any of that stuff. So whatever, it is what it is. That's how it went. Now, again, Google no longer uses AdWords as a label for the product. The feature still exists. The function still exists. Google obviously shows ads along with search results, but now they just call it's part of Google Ads. AdWords is no longer a separate thing. Now, right now, the numbers are a little harder to get these days, but as far as I know, still Google's main revenue source, about 70% of Google's revenue. Neat thing about it, it provides a virtuous cycle. A virtuous cycle is the opposite of a vicious cycle. Virtuous cycle is things get better because they're good, right? A vicious cycle is things get worse because they're bad. So because Google picks ads with high quality scores, right? Not necessarily that the ads are better, but Google does a good job picking ads that are likely to get clicked. It earns high revenues, which makes it easier to reinvest some of that in developing new and better improved systems that its competitors like Bing can't. Also, it's extensible. It's designed to be a set of rules that adapt to the changing online environment. The single biggest one is the bidding process, right? So the bidding process, Google could have picked like a flat rate for ads and said, okay, we're going to charge you like $1 a click. But the reality is, for some ads, $1 is not nearly enough, and for other ads, it might be quite a bit too much. So a flat rate does not make sense at all for this model. The other thing, the year 2000, Google knows internet's going to be growing tremendously, and that's automatically going to put upward pressure on prices, which is going to bring bags and bags of money into Google. So they kind of just want to set themselves up to ride that wave. So the single most important thing there is forcing those advertisers to bid against each other. All right. And that'll automatically bring the price up without Google even having to do much work to make sure it happens. Okay. Now again, Bing and Yahoo, they have similar business models, although, you know, Bing is like the sad cousin. But I'll do a quick demo about virtuous cycle. We'll talk about this. I'll do it in Notepad. So suppose Google has an opportunity to improve revenue by investing, let's say, $5 billion in hardware and software. Okay? If Google's revenue, improve revenue by 2%. Okay? If Google's revenue is 200 billion, then that should bring in about 4 billion just the first year. And most of that is going to be just straight profit because the platform is already built. So Google has a very short cycle to recoup that kind of investment. But suppose Bing has the same opportunity to improve revenue by 2% by investing 5 billion. Okay? But if Bing's revenue, and this is actually a plausible number, I'm going to be generous and put it up. If Bing's revenue is 20 billion, then it's absolutely not a slam dunk yes, right? Because it'll take, you know, at best, 2% of 20 billion, that's 400 million. At best, it's going to take like 12 and a half years to get that money back, right? And that's assuming it all goes well and all that. Maybe they do it, maybe not, but they're going to have to take some time and think about it, right? Do they do it right away now? Do they push it off a few years, hoping that, you know, the cost of the systems comes down? Whatever, right? So Google can chase this stuff right away. Bing, not so much. And this is a classic example of economies of scale, right? Because Google is big, these tiny incremental improvements in its process yield real money. For Bing, not so much. Okay. All right. So last stuff here. Google, again, wants to maximize its total long-term revenue. One way to do that is by charging more per unit of ad space. And they simply do that by letting the advertisers bid the price up. The second thing, of course, they use quality score along with the bids to prioritize ads that are more likely to bring in long-term revenue, right? So if there's an ad where the bid is decent and the quality score is good, that's probably the one you want to put at the top of the page. All right, and we've talked about these other factors a little bit, so that's fine. I guess one we didn't, shifting keyword management to advertisers. Once Google's gone back and forth on this, in the first iteration of AdWords, Google let the advertisers pick the terms they wanted to bid on for their ads. There was a window of a few years where Google actually picked the ads itself. They said, you know what, we think these keywords will be good with your ads. And then for reasons that are not entirely clear, I think just because advertisers really wanted that level of control, Google gave it back to them and let advertisers start bidding again. All right, so last thing here, AdWords diagram, right? Google has a whole bunch of advertisements and a whole bunch of information about search terms and which ads perform well with what search terms. So when somebody asks for a set of search results, Google's ad allocator, they say, okay, here's the actual results in orange, and we're going to sprinkle around some ads around the top and the bottom of the page mostly. So when viewers click ads, Google updates its allocation data, something like, oh, somebody clicked on this ad. That's great. We'll make a note of that, bumps up that quality score a little bit. And of course, the advertisers pay Google. All right. One last thing. I posted this case. It's up in the Google Lectures model. Be nice if a few people read it ahead of Friday. We're going to discuss it at the start of class. It's the text from a New York Times article from around 2012 that talks about a cabin rental business that started off in the early days of AdWords and then had to modify its business model to go forward. Okay, so this won't be directly addressed on the text, but it will make some of this abstract stuff a little more real, I hope. All right, we'll see you next time. Bye, everybody.